The 40th book that I completed in 2024 is Brooklyn Goes Home, and the subtitle is The Rise and Fall of American Greyhound Racing and the Dog That Inspired a Movement. This is by Christine Dorchak and Carey Theil. They are a married couple who have devoted their lives to saving greyhounds. Basically, their organization, World 2K, World Grey 2K, there we go, shut down racing in America. There are no tracks left. The last two tracks were in West Virginia in 2022. I've owned 3 greyhounds. I currently have 1. I've also fostered 8 or 9 greyhounds, and I work with a greyhound agency in Valparaiso, Indiana called American Greyhound. I also work with, in a sort of financial way, Galgos del Sol out of Spain. A Galgo is a Spanish greyhound. That's currently what I have. It's become harder and harder to do greyhound work in America because there aren't any tracks, so there aren't as many dogs to save. So our organization, for example, has started going to Spain to bring Galgos back over and save them. The way Galgos are treated is horrible. I won't even go into it because it's absolutely disgusting. You can look that up for yourself if you want to, but again, it's rough. It's really rough. Think Sons of Anarchy rough, except with dogs. And then also just the way they were treated on the track. So Brooklyn, the dog on the cover, is a dog that Dorchak and Theil saw at the Cannondrome, which is in Macau. I'm not sure I'm saying that right. Macau. It's I think a province in China. It was the only racetrack in China, and it was known as the racetrack of death. A dog did not leave that racetrack. A dog would be killed on that racetrack when it no longer could race. So they see this Brooklyn dog in 2012. And it's pathetic. It's in a muzzle, and it's in this iron barred cage. And they take a picture of it, and they use it in their campaign in Massachusetts. It was their first campaign to end greyhound racing in Massachusetts. And they use the image of Brooklyn to win the constitutional amendment that banned greyhound racing in Massachusetts. They then moved on to Arkansas and also to Oklahoma and to Texas and Oregon. Those were the next states that they were able, and they were learning things along the way. So in 2018, when it came time to go down to Florida and stop dog racing there, they had practice. And so even though Florida was a much bigger state than they had worked in before, I mean, Texas is huge, but there weren't very many tracks in Texas, whereas in Florida there were several. There were like a dozen tracks. And they were knowledgeable enough to know how to go about working the political machinations necessary to end greyhound racing. One of the things that's really uplifting about this book is that, I mean, when you think of bipartisan issues in 2024, I can't think of very many. Republicans and Democrats worked together to end greyhound racing, which I thought was really interesting. Republicans were against the gambling, and Democrats were against the animal abuse, and they were able to come together and bond over that issue. This is a really great book. Dorchak and Theil end up finding Brooklyn 10 years later. They think for sure she has to have died, or it's a male. I think Brooklyn's a female name, but it's a male. They think for sure that he has to have died. They adopt him. 5 weeks after they adopt him, they find cancer in his leg. It's still a happy ending. He doesn't die from the cancer at that time, and he ends up living out a really great life with these 2 unbelievable people that have saved the lives, both directly and indirectly, of, honestly, hundreds of thousands of dogs. And now they're moving on to Australia and to Britain and to Spain, and they are going to continue to try to ban greyhound racing. For those of you that haven't looked into just how brutal greyhounds are treated, I don't recommend necessarily looking up the Galgo situation, because again, that brutality is pretty disgusting. The brutality for greyhound racing, for example, dogs would just break a leg, right? They're running at 45 miles an hour around a track. They would break a leg. And if they broke their leg, then they would be euthanized. That was it. Sometimes a dog would jump the track. So that means that they're chasing that mechanical lure around the track, and they would jump into the middle of the track and get electrocuted. That would happen about once a week in Florida, and then the dog would die from that. So those are some of the less brutal ways that greyhound racing messed up dogs. Here's an example that I can share. When they finally got Brooklyn in, I think it was 2020, maybe it was 2019 before COVID, when they finally got Brooklyn, 17 of his teeth had been whittled down to the gum from chewing on his iron bar over the course of a decade. So very brutal, very abused dogs, and a lot of great changes have happened just within the last 6 or 7 years, and much of it is due to the work of these two people and the people that they have collected and surrounded themselves with. And as a greyhound owner and an animal lover and a dog lover especially, I am forever indebted to these people. This is not necessarily a book for everyone. It is a book for animal lovers. It has a foreword by Jane Goodall, so you can see that obviously it has a lot of clout. It's the best greyhound book that I've ever read. There aren't many. I think I've read them all. Again, there's only about 7 or 8 books on greyhounds, and I think that I've read them all. This is the best at telling the history of greyhound racing, at least in America. Highly recommended if you are a dog lover.